welcome to this week's edition of the Wispy Mop Music Acoustic Radio Podcast Series. I'm your host, Todd, middle initial C. Walker. Yes, that's right, it's me. And sitting next to me is Michael Betteridge, and he, among other things, currently his job is general manager at Cool Oldies 1450 WTHU in Thurmont, Maryland.
Yes.
But you have a whole lot of background that's somewhat similar to mine. Uh-huh. So let's get the radio stuff out of the way first. How did you get into general manager at a radio station?
Oh, let's see. I was working at the World Bank in 1996 and driving down the road, and I heard an advertisement on the radio for auditions for DJs here in Frederick. And I said, all my life people have said, you have a radio voice.
You do have a radio voice.
Thank you. And I said, I've been playing music in rock and roll bands since I was in junior high school. And I just dated myself with that. And so I said, there would be really cool to be able to sit and play music because I love discovering new music and sharing it with people and telling them. Now, let me tell you the rest of the story, kind of a Paul Harvey moment with the music. And so I went and I auditioned. And it was WJTM up on the top of the mountain at Braddock Heights. And they said, you're in. Come on in. Start Friday. So that Friday, they trained me. They showed me how to run the board, the CD player. The guy sat with me, and that Friday, I'm on the air. And I'm sitting there like going, I was a little nervous, but not too. And I started having fun with it and playing music and having a blast and sharing all my music. And then I got married in 2001, and my wife joined me on the radio show.
She did?
Yes. And we called it Praise God It's Friday, because it was every Friday evening. And then we started bringing in local bands. And we did everything from bluegrass to rock to folk and country. And we brought them in and played unplugged in the studio and interviewed them on Friday nights. And it really took off. We were having a blast doing that. It was so much fun. And then one day we came to work and there was a padlock on the door. And we went, uh-oh. The radio station had been sold. It was headline news in the Frederick News Post, $1.2 million. And WYPR in Baltimore bought it. And they didn't want it.
They just wanted the transmitter, probably.
They wanted the signal.
Uh-huh.
They wanted to increase their station in Baltimore to 50,000 watts to compete with WAMU, and the only thing in their way was a little FM station here in Frederick. So they paid $1.2 million of taxpayer money, I might add, because it's NPR, to buy and shut down WJTM. And so we were done, just that quickly we were done. Well, I was on the board of directors at the Frederick Rescue Mission at the time, and I managed to convince them to let me open up a studio up in the top of the rescue mission and start teaching the men in the Change Life Recovery Program about music and radio. And we opened an internet station in the upstairs. Just a bunch of the DJs from the old JTM got together, and we have to do a shout out to William Warren, our IT guy, who was with us, still with me at the radio station all these years later. That's 27 years later, and William and I pulled it all together, and we had one of the very first internet-only radio stations in Frederick, and that would have been in 2005. Mm-hmm. And so somewhere around that time, I heard a rumor that there was a radio station in Thurmont for sale, and I went up there and looked at it. It was the little WTHU over there in Radio Lane in Thurmont, and I spoke to the owner, and I made him an offer, and he rejected it, and I went, okay, whatever, we tried. And so I went back home and didn't worry about it. About 6 months later, I get a phone call from him, and he goes, that offer you made me? I said, yeah. He says, is it still on the table? And I said, yeah. And he said, I'll take it. So it turned out he had an illness, a very serious illness, and needed to get out right away. So in June of 2008, we turned on the microphones for the first time ever at WTHU radio station, and here we are 18 years later.
Now, was it an oldies station prior?
It was.
Yeah.
It was a classic oldies station run off the ABC radio format. All automation, no DJs there. It was all satellite feed pull. So, yeah.
You just made it live.
We did. Mm-hmm. We did. We made it live. We brought in lots of great DJs and had lots of fun and really cranked up. It was an amazing journey, and it has been an amazing journey. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea why we're still open. COVID was really devastating for our radio station. Unlike, I don't know if you know this or not, but 80% of the radio stations in America are owned by 5 corporations.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. and they have deep pockets and millions of dollars. And here we are, the littlest radio station in Maryland, WTHU. The station was opened in 1967. A guy named Vic Leisner was mad because he couldn't get Orioles games. So he applied for a 100-watt license from the FCC. It was granted. He and his 16-year-old son built the radio station, the tower, turned it on, and went on the air in June of 1967, and been broadcasting live 24/7 ever since.
Wow.
Yeah. And here we are 18 years later. We're still doing it. Matter of fact, that little radio station, even though we're 80% classic oldies, and it's all really the really cool stuff, the 50s and 60s and 70s. We don't go into the 80s, although it's funny that we could call 80s and 90s oldies nowadays, but you can. Mm-hmm. That's sort of a reflection of how we're doing. And we play all of that great music, and yet we are the #1 radio station in the entire state of Maryland for high school sports. We did 62 games on the radio last year: football, basketball, baseball, and softball.
But you have to do them remotely.
We do. I did one yesterday. We did Linganore at Catoctin baseball yesterday.
Oh, wow.
On the radio. And I had a team of 2. I've sort of stepped back into the production, video, back scene thing. I do play-by-play from time to time. I started out, great story. When I bought the station in 2008, I approached the athletic director at Catoctin High School, Tom Sherrill, and I said, Tom, I coached football, I played football, I like football, I'm a big Redskins fan. I said, what if we were to take your football team and do 5 games, just your home games on the radio? He said, yeah, let's try it. So I put everything together and just by myself went up there and I did 5 games that year in 2008. So in August of 2009, I approached him and I said, so what kind of feedback you got? And he said, really good. Everybody loved it. And I said, good, let's do all 10 this year, home and away. And he said, okay, let's go for it. Well, Todd, 14 games later, I'm standing in Ravens Stadium in a professional NFL press box, pinching myself.
Wow.
Because Catoctin is in the state championship for the first time ever, and they won.
And you're doing the play-by-play.
And I'm doing the play-by-play with my team of 3 or 4 guys in the press box in an NFL professional football stadium. So I was hooked. That was it. So
now, are you still on the radio?
Yeah, I do the news.
Okay.
I do the local news. I have a blast doing that. Today I did a great story about a hardware store up in Littlestown, Pennsylvania, Ace Hardware. A parakeet flew in the front door. And I start the news story out and say there was a hardware store in Littlestown that had a problem with gender confusion. And the parakeet flew in, and they named it Parakeet Petey, and it was very friendly. They said they knew it was domesticated because it had to belong to someone because it was calm and friendly. And so they had it around the store for days and days, and they went on social media and Facebook, and finally the real owners showed up and said, that's our parakeet. And they took a picture and posted it on Facebook of the parakeet. Turns out the parakeet's name was Cher. Ooh. And Petey was not a he was a she.
Well,
so I have loved doing news stories like that. So I still do the news occasionally. I do some ad copy once in a while, but I still do play-by-play in color. But I've been blessed to be able to assemble a really good team of local coaches here from Frederick County. The guys are great and they love it, and the kids know them, and the sports, it's something for them. Once they get out of the sport, it keeps them connected, and they just have a blast doing it. So
well, it's like watching the NFL commentators, and they have the 4 or 5 of them sitting there during halftime and whatever. And other than the host, who may or may not be, depending on whether it's male or female, may or may not be a former player.
Yeah.
All the other ones are former players.
Yes.
And it's amazing, 1, how articulate they are, and 2, how they can recall stuff. Just bingo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blows me away.
Me too.
I can't remember the book I'm reading.
Well, and that's a great point, because I've noticed in the last 5 years, I'm 73 years old, and
You're a youngster.
I've noticed in the last 5 years that I started to slow down a little bit in terms of recall. Mm-hmm. And so as I noticed that, I'm humble enough to be able to say there are people that are better than you step back and teach. And so I've got a guy named Ryan, a guy named Jacob just started yesterday, just moved here from Phoenix, and Jacob did play-by-play for minor league ball. And I've got Ryan Piers is the head basketball broadcaster for Howard Basketball.
Wow.
And he's doing football and basketball with me. And Coach Rick Little is the former baseball, basketball, and girls basketball coach at Walkersville. He's my go-to guy. I mean, Rick has been just great. He and I have been together 7 or 8 years now doing this all over the place. We just did last Wednesday, we did a game at Boonesboro. Rick and I together. I did the play-by-play. He did the color from center field, from behind the fence in center field.
Oh, really? That's cool.
So we have a lot of fun. We really enjoy it, and there's nothing more exciting than Friday Night Lights football, or being in the Oakland Linganore basketball arena on a Friday night towards the end of the season when it really counts. The place is electric.
Oh, absolutely. All the family and friends and students. My gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're also a musician.
Yes.
And
yes.
as the sign says back here, this is an acoustic music thing.
Yep.
And he was telling me off air that he plays guitar, bass,
piano,
yeah. And he still performs, but he doesn't perform at breweries and wineries. Where do you perform?
Actually, it's a captive audience. I've been doing Christian prison ministry now for 30 years, so I perform in prison. Take a band, and that's why I play those three, is because whenever we put a band together, you might have 4 or 5. One time we had 11 guitarists, and I said, I'll play piano. So just to give you an idea of how I had to adapt to each of those.
Now, do you rehearse as a band?
Yes, yeah. We rehearse a lot, and it's fun because we do the old timey stuff. You know, mm-hmm. the old brother, where art thou? This little light of mine, sure. And all the old classics. And every once in a while, we'll throw in one of our own. I did "Lean on Me." I sang "Lean on Me" the last weekend we did back in the fall at Jessup Correctional Center, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, the guys are great. They love it. I mean, they come in. I'll tell you a funny story. The last time we came in, one of the men leaned over to me, and he says, "What's a bunch of rich, fat white guys like you doing in this place?" He says, "You getting paid?" And I said, well, "Yeah, we are. I'm just by the look on your face when we play that music." Yeah, and he smiled. Yeah, because these guys have a tough life, a tough road to hoe. And one of the wardens told me recently at Hagerstown that he said 80% of the men in that prison are from one zip code in the state of Maryland.
No.
Yes. And I said, which one? I don't want to go there. Yeah. And he said, Eastern Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. Highly congested. He
said it's a drug machine that grinds up young men and spits them out in Hagerstown.
Yeah. No, I mentioned to you before we went on air that I went into the Walpole State Prison, which is now called Cedar Junction in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. It still is, I think, the highest security prison. Mm-hmm. And I had to go in first as, in order for the inmates to get out and go into their halfway house, they have to have a sponsor. So I was assigned to be this fellow's sponsor. Nice guy. We met in the chapel, so it was just the two of us. And I said, "What are you in for?" He goes, "Drugs." Mm. I said, "Using them?" "No, selling them, dealing them." Mm. I said, "How did you get into that?" He goes, "Well, I grew up in the projects. Yeah. The only male role models we had was the guy selling drugs down on the corner, and he always flashed a lot of money, drove a nice car, and the girls always loved him. So that's who we wanted to be." Yeah.
You want to dig ditches for $10 an hour, or do you want to make thousands for walking across the street?
Yeah, he was a roofer by trade, and he says that hot, asphalty, kind of oily stuff.
Well, that's tough work, yeah.
Yeah, he said. Yeah. I said, "Now, when you get out, you're going to go back to roofing?" He goes, "Yeah, for a short while, but I'll probably end up back in here." Oh,
yeah. Well, that's another thing. Now, that's a great segue to the Kairos Prison Ministry, which is an international ministry. It is a tried, tested, and proven program that works. And I'm really blessed to be a part of it. The recidivism rate for the average felony inmate in Maryland is 60%. 6 out of 10 go back. The system is kind of designed to put them back. That's a whole nother show we could do. But the short version is that when they go through our Kairos program, it drops to 17%. Wow. And that's why the wardens invite us in, because the numbers are real and they can see them.
Saves taxpayers a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard one of them said something interesting to me one time. At the end of a weekend, he looked at me and he goes, at the very least, all things said and done, he said, there's a calm that comes over the prison when you guys are here that doesn't exist the rest of the year. He said, and that was worth its weight in gold. And that made me feel so good, because I could tell you stories that will curl your hair about things I've seen and places I've been and things I've done in these prisons over the last 27 years of doing ministry. But I love playing guitar. When my aunt was a coffee house folk singer back in the 50s, 500 miles,
sure.
If you miss the train I'm on. Yeah. And so I would sneak in and steal her guitar when she wasn't listening. And the first song I ever learned to play was Riders in the Sky.
Oh, really?
On the guitar.
Yeah.
And when I was 14, my parents bought me my first electric guitar. I started in a band in 8th grade. The name of the band was Sigma Epsilon Chi. And we started a band, and you'll love this, as a guitarist, my parents got me my first guitar ever. It was a Silvertone.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you remember or not, but the guitar, the amplifier was built right into the case.
It was.
And you stood the case up, opened it up, and plugged it into the wall, and turned it on, and plugged yourself in, and that was your guitar.
Yeah, it's known as Dan Electro now.
Right. And I still have a picture of me standing in front of the Christmas tree. And they also got me a black and brown velour kind of a turtleneck looking, very British rock.
Yeah, but definitely period, which is wonderful.
Right. And so I'm standing with braces, and I'm standing in front of the Christmas tree with my new Silvertone electric guitar, and that was my first guitar.
Well, do you remember the movie That Thing You Do?
Yes.
And in their early days, the rhythm guitar player played a Silvertone, which is now Dan Electro.
Yeah.
And of course, they gravitated to Rickenbackers and
Well, I went on and bought a Kappa Continental. I don't know if you ever heard of those, but they were specifically made by Chuck Levin. And,
cool.
Down in Silver Spring.
He's still in business.
He still is. And then in 1969, I bought a Les Paul Standard, and I still have it.
How's your shoulder?
Yeah.
They're not the lightest guitar.
No, they're not. They're not.
But they have great sustain.
And just the fingers, the keyboards, the neck is just wonderful. It's actually a unique guitar, this particular version of the Les Paul, because Les Paul was trying to compete with the Fender Strat. Mm-hmm. And so it's a Les Paul with a Strat sound.
Oh.
Yeah, they put the extra humbuck and pickup in there.
A friend of mine from high school, when my college roommate Rich and I were a duo on Cape Cod, we do the Sub and Pub and all the places. There was a trio, and they were all fellas from my high school. And the bass player didn't sing; he'd sing backup and stuff, but he played really good bass. And I interviewed him recently, just before Christmas, because his dad wrote the lyrics and he wrote the music to a song called Cape Cod Christmas Time, which is absolutely wonderful. They recorded it in the 1970s. It's my favorite non-traditional Christmas song of all time. And I thought, I need to interview him at some point. Lives in Florida now, retired, all that kind of stuff. And I said, you had a bass that looked really cool. It was like a dark brown color. And he goes, oh, that was a Gibson Les Paul bass.
Oh, I didn't know they made one.
Yep, it was passive, extremely heavy, had a real soft sound. And you see them occasionally on like reverb.com for sale and stuff like that. But the Fender Precision blew them out of the water.
Well, and that's the segue for me to radio, is because as a young man, I had a transistor radio. I had it plugged in my ear all the time. I'd get under the covers at night with a flashlight, and I'd listen to stations that sounded like they were on the other side of the world.
Yes.
KOKO from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and New York and places.
WBZ Boston, you've probably heard.
Right, you could get that.
Yeah.
And I would listen to and there was something going on. It was this British invasion music back in the mid-'60s that was coming in that was so cool. Of course, soul was the thing. Soul was very popular back in the mid-'60s when I was growing up. And then, my grandmother, my mom grew up in Long Island in Hampton Bays. My grandmother lived in Hampton Bays right on the water. And so right about at the end of every school year, right around May, I'd start bugging my mother like crazy. I'd just be in her all, Mom, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Why you always bother me? And I'd just be pushing to get sent to grandma's for the summer. So around about June, Mom and Dad would say, all right, you're going to your grandmother's. And they'd put me on the train, pack me up, put me on the train, and send me to Grandma's out of hand. Oh, what a wonderful place. The beach, the ocean. I had a boat, I had a rowboat. I'd row out into the middle of the bay and fish all day. And then, but the music scene was out on Dune Road where all the nightclubs were, that all these really cool, famous artists were showing up and playing the summer circuit out there in the Hamptons. And so at 14, we all went out and got fake IDs, not because we wanted to drink, but because we wanted to get in the clubs to hear these bands play. Yeah. And so there was a place called The Barge. It's no longer there, on Dune Road in Hampton Bays. It was actually a floating barge nightclub with a catwalk to get out to it. And so we got in the barge one night. Me and a couple buddies were all musicians, and we got in the bar. 14 years old, we got, a little a pool party band, was what I called them. And we walk into the barge, and there's this great band playing. And man, the music is just rocking. The whole place is going crazy. And I'm like, these guys are so good. I was so inspired. I wanted to grow up and be just like them. And so, and I see them driving around town, and they had a 65 Chevy convertible that they drove around town in, all these guys in this band. They were there all summer. And on the side of the van, the convertible, it said Little Rascals. Okay. And so everybody knew them. They were the hot band. These were the Rascals.
Right.
That was where they started. They had a trademark violation with that name, so they had to change it first to the Rascals and then to the Young Rascals, because there was another trademark violation. So that was Felix Cavalier and his band, the Rascals. I saw him 14 years old in a nightclub playing Mustang Sally, and
Oh, I love all that music, and trying to play a lot of those hits as a fledgling guitarist back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Never got good enough to play them well, but that's what we would do, is we would sit around and go, how do they play this? Mm-hmm. And you probably did the same thing.
And we didn't have YouTube.
No, we did not.
We had to play the song over until our parents would scream down, turn that thing off. We did, and we had to play it over and over and over again. And nowadays, I'm just absolutely jealous about the technology. You can actually go into YouTube and find a song that removes the guitar part. So you can play along and record yourself in the part of the guitar for the song. It's just amazing.
It's almost as scary as that little strip and that little chip on the credit cards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to be right back. You folks stay there. We'll be back with Michael Betteridge, and we're going to talk about music some more.
Okay, good.
I'm fabulous, WTHU.
Welcome back, folks. We're here with Michael Betteridge from Cool Oldies 1450 WTHU
is good.
THU,
we do.
Yep.
That's actually our tagline, our signature line.
It is that huge wattage station in Thurmont, all of 100 watts.
500.
Oh, it's 500?
It's 500, yeah.
I thought I read words, or maybe somebody said.
You're right. It was the original, and by the way, this is historic. It was the last 100-watt license issued in America in 1967.
Really?
Yes. Since then, we've gotten an increase to 500. Which still makes us tiny. Compared to our nearest neighbor, the AM station here in Frederick is 5,000 watts. So that's 100 times.
So what's your reach?
It's still pretty good. I tell people Gettysburg to Brunswick, Hagerstown to Mount Airy. Mm-hmm. It's like a 25 in each direction, like a 50-mile circle in the daytime. See, FM is unique. People think that you turn it down. People always say, well, you turn it down at night. No, we don't turn it down at night. What happens is, unlike FM, which is a line of sight technology, that's why they always put the towers on the mountains.
Right.
AM, if you picture AM, the tower doesn't do anything. It's more of a focusing agent. Most people don't know this, but buried in the ground at the foot of the tower are 180 copper spokes. They're about this wide, and they run the length, the height of the tower is the length of the spoke.
Oh, really?
So my tower in Thurmont's 200 feet. I have 180 200-foot copper spokes. By the way, it's a lot of money. It's worth it. So don't go out and dig up my copper ones. Okay. So, and those act like, think of it as like a satellite dish that's buried under the ground pointing straight up. The signal hits the ionosphere and drops down over that 50-mile radius. We did a lot of work. For example, when we first bought the station, our engineers had a brilliant idea. He got out his daughter's little red wagon, and he put a Gauss meter in it. And we dragged the wagon in a circle at different distances from the tower, around the tower. And we watched the Gauss meter. And every time we passed over an active copper spoke, the meter went like that. And when we passed over one and the meter didn't move, we put a flag in the ground, and we ended up having to dig up about 15 spokes that had been disconnected from the tower. So we were missing that part of the signal. And that really improved our signal when it's been really, we have a very robust signal. But radio is like real estate. We've got a station at 1450 in Lancaster. We've got a station in D.C., WOL, at 1450, and we've got one down in West Virginia. So we're kind of shoehorned in. We could never increase our power for that reason.
Because you'd encroach on their
Because I'd encroach on their territory. So we're stuck at 500 watts. Getting FM wouldn't change anything, because FM, you're only allowed to mirror your...
Oh, really?
Yes. The new FM for AM station rules just allow you to mirror what you've already got. You don't get to increase anything.
So as a kid, listening to WBZ Boston, because
Yes.
I grew up in Cape Cod.
Yes.
And they'd have that, I don't know who the DJ was, in the 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., and they would take phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, someone would say, hey, I'm calling from Austin, Texas.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how does it go that far? That was a 50,000 watt station.
Okay.
But what some people told me was there's more of a reach at nighttime. Is that true?
Here's what happens. By the way, I got an email from Finland.
You did?
The guy heard our radio station and wanted to verify it. So he sent me an email and told me exactly what program he heard and exactly what time. Wanted me to verify for my program guide, because apparently there's a society of people that do this.
Wow.
So that he could officially record this as one of the longest radio reaches. And it verified, he did hear us, but it's something you may have remembered from back in the CB days called skip.
I remember hearing that,
Okay,
yes.
so what happens is in AM, and CBs are AM broadcast receivers, transmitters, the ionosphere goes up 400 miles at night. It raises when the sun sets. And that's the reflector that radio stations use for their signal. So if I'm pushing a signal straight up into the reflector and it bounces over a 50-mile radius, if I raise that reflector 400 miles, my signal goes like that.
Yeah.
And that's why at night you hear that wah, 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 wah. You're hearing 100 radio stations at once from all over the East Coast that are all scattering their signal out. Now, the big boys like WBZ in Boston, who have 50,000 watts, man, they power up at night and they blow the East Coast off because they can.
Yeah.
And that's why I could listen to KOKO in Fort Wayne, Indiana when I was, 10 years old in my bed. It's because of that power up at night phenomenon for the ionosphere raising up. For stations like mine that don't have that kind of power, we lose about half of our broadcast range. It shrinks from a 50-mile radius to a 25-mile radius, 12 and a half in either direction. So that would primarily be like Emmitsburg to Frederick, kind of a...
There's still an awful lot of people live in that area.
Yeah, and believe it or not, at night they can't get the Frederick stations up there in Thurmont. So at night, we are one of the few stations they can hear on their radios if they're using radio. Of course, that's another conversation altogether. Right. Is AM radio obsolete? The answer's yes and no. No, because people rely on it for weather and traffic all the time.
That's right.
It's the commuter car go-to. And, and ironically, I thought about this a lot. From a musician standpoint, the music that we're playing is AM, was written and recorded for AM mono, low fidelity, and it doesn't play well. Even when they remix it and remaster it, it doesn't play well in FM because like an old Beatles song will lose the quality of the quality and the depth of its tone when you don't. But playing it on an old AM station I have a tube transmitter, 1,000-watt tube transmitter. I want you to come up and look at it sometime.
Oh, I'd love to.
It was built in 1969, okay? You could throw it off a roof from 2 stories up, and it would still run. I mean, it weighs 700 pounds, but the depth and the quality of the sound of that reproduction from those original 45s that you and I grew up with is amazing.
I have a friend who sells tubes on eBay, and he's like one of the world's biggest suppliers of old tubes.
Oh, I need to know this guy.
Yeah, I'll get you his contact.
Good.
He lives in Brunswick, as a matter of fact. And he has the testing equipment for both U.S. made and European for all. It's amazing. But he told me one time he drove to Michigan maybe because somebody said, I have this, collection of old tubes. I'm willing to sell them, but only if someone will take all of them.
Yeah.
He drove out, got there, loaded his car up. He said he couldn't see outside window, rear window, everything. There's so many boxes of tubes, and drove back. Just did a turnaround. Didn't sleep the whole time. But from those tubes, some of them you have to throw away, or however you dispose of them. And I think he said he can repair them, or maybe not. But he ends up making tons of money doing that because there are people who they don't know where else to get them.
Now, I'm going to really test everybody's acumen for this. Do you remember back in the day, you could walk into a drugstore and there was a tube tester in the corner?
I don't remember.
And you
that.
could plug your tube in to the tube tester and it would tell you how good your tube was, if your tube was still.
Do I remember that? Yeah.
Not every, but a lot. There were a few pharmacies that had these tube testers over in the corner. The old style with the seats everybody sat in with the soda fountain and everything, and the counter and there was always a tube tester over in the corner, so you could take your tubes and go test them. So the tubes for this the transmitter, and by the way, we have the exact same transmitter is in the old WTRI down in Brunswick. Our engineer worked on both of them, and we were always trading parts back and forth.
Oh, really?
The output tubes on that are this big. It's a 400C and I get them off of eBay from people like your friend who have a collection of them that they're holding on to, and they put them on eBay and they sell them. And I pick them up. I can pick them up. The last two I got was an estate sale from a woman whose husband passed. He was an old engineer, and she's just pulling boxes off the shelves. She has no idea what they are, putting them on eBay, taking a picture and put them on eBay, and I went, I want those. So, yeah.
So, from a music standpoint, we're going back to music now.
Okay, good.
Of your three instruments, guitar, bass, and piano, which do you have more fun playing?
Oh, a guitar. Guitar for me is therapy. I will sit out on my patio. I have a big, massive bird feeders I love birds. And a friend just turned me on to the Merlin app. Have you ever heard of the Merlin app?
No, I have the Bird Buddy one.
I got the Merlin app. I'll show it to you. It tells you, if you turn it on and you let it sit there, it'll tell you what birds, it'll identify the song of the bird.
Oh, really?
And tell you what bird is in your backyard. And it's really sensitive. I mean, it'll catch, and you can sit there in my backyard. I can sit there and get 10 birds in 5 minutes pop up, and some that I've never even heard of. Like, what is a dark-eyed junco? I'm like, what is? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, my wife has purchased. I think we have 3 or 4 of them. They're little, not trifolds. They're like 5-folds or something, and they show a graphic of all the birds specific to this area.
Yeah.
And so if we see one, we go, what is that? Open that thing up, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. And this one does the same thing. It'll take a picture, and it'll identify it by picture. So I'll sit out on my patio just in the late evening with the birds chirping and Merlin on, and I'll just play.
So what guitar are you playing? What's your favorite guitar?
I have a Takamine acoustic that I love. It's the one I take to prison with me. I went out and bought one of those $250 electric guitars that are rated, the cheapos that are rated really well.
Yep.
It sounds great. I mean, it's every bit as great as any regular expensive guitar. I use that a lot for regular gigs where I need amplification. But my talk is what I use in prison most of the time, and I never take the Gibson doesn't really go out of the house anymore.
No, people will ask me. I just did a review on a custom guitar. I had Marty Fair from Fairbuilt Guitars, who's just over the bridge by Harper's Ferry, and I was describing it and showing it, and I said, will I gig this guitar? I might at a winery, maybe a brewery, maybe a coffee house, not a bar.
Yeah.
I'll take my less expensive guitars for that because I don't want to take the chance of somebody bumping into it or me bumping into them.
And my Takamine, for the kind of music you do when you're doing prison ministry, and a lot, I do every once in a while, I'll get a call to come perform at a different place or play for some place they need music. Steve Hess?
Oh, yes.
And Steve and I play a lot together, and Gene, his partner Gene, and we've all been playing. We'll go to a party and we'll break out our guitars and we'll just play for hours. We almost took out the back porch of my townhouse in Foxcroft because we had too many people on it at a barbecue.
You have to be careful of that.
Yeah, but we love playing, and I like a lot of musician friends in the area, and we'll go somewhere to a party or to an event and just play for the fun of it.
Oh, those guys are great. They really are. I mean, just nice human beings.
Yeah.
Last time I saw Gene, I think, was at Walmart. And I'm standing looking, trying to find something. Because, you walk into those places, there's about 14 million more things than you need or want. Yeah. But you can't find the one thing you need. But anyways, I'm standing there. All of a sudden, I hear this, "Hey, Todd." I turn around. Here's this, and I couldn't place him. Take a person out of where you know them from.
Right.
And then Steve would be sitting in the audience at Warman's Mill when I would play there in the summertime, he and his wife. And I'd look up and I go, "Oh, my gosh, there you are."
Ann was just at my house yesterday.
Is that right?
Yep. She and my wife are close friends. So, and those two guys are incredibly talented, gifted musicians. And I've learned a lot from them just playing with them and hanging out. Every once in a while, they'll be at a gig. I think the last time I remember was when the mayor still owned Jennifer's, and we were there and they were playing. And there was we sang in the choir at All Saints together, the church and All Saints. That's where we all met originally. And they called 3 or 4 of us out that were all choir members, and we walked up on stage and we sang a cappella "Down to the River to Pray." 5-part harmony. And I'm going to tell you, give you goosebumps, because we really love doing stuff like that. So
Huey Lewis in the News, of course, he can't sing because was it deaf? Yes, he's deaf now, I think. But the part of their show was their a cappella portion, which, as good as they were as a group, when they did a cappella, it was because, again, the harmonies and everything. And, of course, they're just doing to keep time, and it is just so wonderful. I love a cappella.
Well, think about Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I mean, once they put the guitars down and went into a cappella, your mouth dropped open.
Oh, yeah. Right? They don't do that for me. Oh, well. Anyways, thank you very much for coming out. I've had a blast, and I do want to come up and see the station.
Yeah, come up and see her. We'll give you the 50-cent tour.
Oh, yeah, do I have 50 cents? I got 47.
Okay,
no, anyways.
We'll give you a break.
All right.
Discount.
Thanks for tuning in, and check out Cool Oldies 1450 if you're in the Frederick, Maryland, Thurmont area. What did you say? It's
1450 on your radio dial, and it's WTHUradio.com, and we're streaming online 24/7.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
We'll see you folks later. Bye-bye.
I'm fabulous WTHU.